The millionaire bet she'd cry on second anniversary with divorce papers. Instead, she gave a gift they deeply. She moved like liquid confidence in her black dress, her natural beauty making the other women in the room look overdressed. But it wasn't her appearance that made Daniel's chest tighten. It was the small silver box in her hands. Have you ever met someone who changed your entire perspective? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. What kind of man bets on his wife's tears? The kind who's about to discover that some games have rules he never learned. The Rolex on Daniel Morrison's wrist caught the light as he adjusted his silk tie for the third time. Lou Bernardine's private dining room buzzed with quiet conversation and clinking champagne glasses. Manhattan's financial elite had gathered for what they believed would be the most expensive entertainment of their lives. She should be here any minute, Daniel muttered to his friend Marcus, who sat across from him counting $100 bills. The stack on the table had grown to $50,000, all betting against one woman's strength. Have you ever been so wrong about someone that it cost you everything? What would you bet on your relationship? Drop your thoughts below because this story is about to show you the difference between confidence and stupidity. 3 months earlier, Daniel had made the cruelest wager of his life. During a bourbon-soaked night at his Wall Street club, he'd boasted to his friends about his control over his wife. By our second anniversary, he'd laughed, I'll hand Aaliyah divorce papers at dinner, and she'll cry like a baby. 50 grand says I can break her in front of all of you. The men had shaken hands on it. After all, Daniel Morrison was known for winning every bet he made. But tonight, as he watched the restaurant's golden chandeliers cast shadows across white tablecloths, something felt different. His confidence had cracks he couldn't explain. Daniel's mind wandered to their morning routine. Aaliyah had kissed him goodbye like always, her lips soft against his cheek. She'd worn that floral perfume he used to love, back when love meant something to him. Back before he'd learned that relationships were just another market to manipulate. You nervous, Danny boy? Marcus teased, loosening his tie. Never seen you sweat before, sure thing. Daniel forced a laugh. He'd built a tech empire from nothing, turning Houston oil money into Silicon Valley gold. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with handshakes and conquered markets with strategic patience. One woman's tears shouldn't make him nervous. The restaurant door opened with a soft chime. Aaliyah Morrison walked in, and every conversation stopped. She moved like liquid confidence in her black dress, her natural beauty making the other women in the room look overdressed. But it wasn't her appearance that made Daniel's chest tighten. It was the small silver box in her hands. That wasn't part of his plan. Happy anniversary, darling, Aaliyah said, her voice carrying across the silent room. She placed a box on the table between them, her smile never wavering. I brought you something special. Daniel's prepared speech died in his throat. He was supposed to present the divorce papers first, watch her world crumble, collect his money. But the way she looked at him, calm, almost pitying, made his hand shake. What's this? He asked, his voice rougher than intended. Open it, she whispered, settling into her chair with the grace of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The silver box felt heavier than it should have. Around them, Daniel's friends leaned forward, sensing drama but not understanding the shift in power they were witnessing. Inside the box, Daniel found photographs, financial documents, a USB drive, and a handwritten note that made his blood turn to ice water. The note read, I know about the bet. I know about Houston. I know about her. But the signature wasn't Aaliyah's. Daniel looked up to find his wife watching him with eyes that held no tears, only triumph. Surprise, she said softly. Some games have more players than you realize. The room exploded into whispers as Daniel's face drained of color. His carefully planned humiliation had become his own execution. Who? He started, but Aaliyah raised her hand to silence him. Before you ask questions you don't want answered, let me save you some time. I've known about your bet for 8 months. Every kiss, every I love you, every night we spent together, I knew you were planning to destroy me for money. Marcus grabbed the photographs from the box, his eyes widening as he flipped through them. Danny, these are from Houston. How did she? Because I'm not the first woman you've done this to, Aaliyah interrupted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Am I, Daniel? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything Daniel had built. From a corner booth, a woman with auburn hair and knowing eyes raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. She'd been sitting there all evening, invisible until this moment. Hello, Danny, she said, her southern accent cutting through the Manhattan sophistication. Did you tell your wife about us? About what you did in Houston before you became this successful businessman? Daniel's world tilted off its axis. Sarah Chin, the woman he'd left broken and bankrupt in Texas 3 years ago, was sitting 20 feet away, very much alive and apparently very much in contact with his wife. Aaliyah reached across the table and touched his trembling hand. The bet was $50,000 that I'd cry tonight, wasn't it? Well, congratulations, Daniel. You're about to see tears, just not the ones you were expecting. As if on cue, tears began streaming down Daniel's face. Before he learned to calculate love like profit margins, Daniel once looked at Aaliyah like she held every answer he'd been searching for. 3 years earlier, the converted warehouse in New Orleans' French Quarter pulsed with jazz music and hope. Hurricane Katrina's anniversary brought out the city's heart. Volunteers, survivors, and donors gathering to prove that some storms make communities stronger. Daniel Morrison had flown in from Houston for business, but something about the music drifting from the charity gala made him park his rental car and walk inside. Do you believe in love at first sight? Or is it just lust wearing a disguise? Have you ever met someone who changed your entire perspective? Share your story, because what happened next proves that even the coldest hearts can feel warmth. The first thing Daniel noticed wasn't Aaliyah's beauty, though she was stunning in her simple black dress. It was the way she moved between tables of displaced families, her nursing background evident in how she checked on an elderly man's oxygen tank without breaking conversation with his worried daughter. She's something else, the bartender said, following Daniel's gaze. Been here since 6 this morning, setting up medical stations. Won't take a break. Daniel had dated socialites, models, CEOs, women who treated charity events like fashion shows. But Aaliyah Davis moved with purpose, her hands gentle as she helped a child with a scraped knee, her laugh genuine as she listened to an old woman's stories. When their eyes met across the crowded room, Daniel felt something he'd forgotten existed. Not desire, though that came later, but recognition. Like finding something he didn't know he'd lost. He approached her during the band's break, when she finally sat down at an empty table, exhaustion showing in the slight slump of her shoulders. You look like you could use this, he said, offering her a glass of sweet tea from the refreshment table. Aaliyah looked up, and Daniel felt the full force of her attention. Her eyes were brown like warm honey, holding intelligence and kindness in equal measure. Thank you, she said, accepting the drink. You're not from around here. Houston, just flew in for business. He gestured to the empty chair across from her. Mind if I sit? You're the first person I've met tonight who looks like she's actually here for the cause, not the networking. She laughed, and the sound hit Daniel somewhere behind his ribs. What gave me away? The fact that I haven't stopped moving for 6 hours? Or that my dress came from Target instead of Nordstrom? The way you checked that man's oxygen levels, Daniel said honestly. Most people here are writing checks. You're actually helping. For the next hour, they talked. Not the surface-level chatter Daniel was used to, but real conversation. Aaliyah told him about growing up in Atlanta with a single mother who worked double shifts to keep them afloat. About choosing nursing because she wanted to heal people, not just profit from their pain. What about you? She asked, stirring the melting ice in her glass. What does a businessman from Houston do when he's not flying to charity events? Daniel found himself being more honest than usual. I build things. Started with nothing after college, turned it into something. But lately, I wonder if I'm building anything that matters. Money doesn't matter if you're the only one counting it, Aaliyah said softly. The band started their next set with a slow blues number. Around them, couples moved to the small dance floor while volunteers cleaned up empty tables. Dance with me, Daniel said, surprising himself with the request. "I'm not really the dancing type," Aaliyah protested, but she was already standing, drawn by something in his voice. On the dance floor, Daniel pulled her close, her hand fitting perfectly against his chest. She smelled like vanilla and kindness, her body warm against his as they swayed to the music. "You're not what I expected," she whispered against his ear, her breath making him shiver. "What did you expect? Another rich guy looking for a good deed to brag about at his next board meeting." Daniel spun her gently, bringing her back against his chest. "And now I think you might actually have a heart under that expensive suit." The song ended too soon, but Daniel didn't let her go. In the dim light of the warehouse, with jazz music wrapping around them like silk, he felt something shift inside his chest. "I want to see you again," he said, his voice rough with want. "I live in Atlanta. You live in Houston. I have a plane." Aaliyah laughed, stepping back but not away. "That's very presumptuous of you, Mr. Morrison." "Daniel, and yes, it is, but I haven't felt this way about anyone in ever." She studied his face, searching for lies she wouldn't find. "Not yet, not when his feelings were still real." "One dinner," she said finally, "but somewhere normal. No private jets or five-star restaurants. Somewhere we can talk." "Deal." As they exchanged numbers, Daniel felt like he was making the best investment of his life. He had no way of knowing that 3 years later, this same woman would be his greatest loss. They spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing stories and dreams that felt sacred in their honesty. When Daniel finally walked her to her hotel, he kissed her forehead with the reverence of someone who'd found something precious. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For reminding me what matters." If only she knew that those words would become a weapon she'd use to destroy him. Every relationship has two versions. The one you show the world and the one that exists behind closed doors. Their public fairy tale was about to become a private nightmare. Daniel's courtship of Aaliyah played out like a romantic movie across 3 cities. Houston penthouse dinners where he cooked for her himself. Atlanta weekend trips where he visited her at the hospital, bringing coffee for her entire nursing staff. New York getaways where they walked through Central Park like any normal couple. His billion-dollar empire forgotten in the simple pleasure of her hand in his. For 18 months, Daniel Morrison was the man he'd always wanted to be. Generous without calculation, vulnerable without strategy, present without agenda. The proposal came during a thunderstorm in his Tribeca penthouse. Lightning illuminated the Hudson River as Daniel dropped to one knee, rain drumming against floor-to-ceiling windows. "Marry me," he said simply, offering a ring that cost more than most people's houses. "Not because it makes sense, but because I can't imagine breathing without you." Aaliyah said yes with tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. The wedding 6 months later made the society pages. A tech billionaire and a nurse from Atlanta. America loved the fairy tale. What they didn't see was Daniel changing, success and status slowly poisoning the man who'd once cooked dinner with gentle hands. How long would you pretend everything was fine if you discovered your partner's betrayal? Would you confront immediately or plan your response? Tell me what you do, because Aaliyah's choice will shock you. The Four Seasons Ballroom in Dallas glittered with oil money and tech fortunes. It was their first anniversary, and Daniel had insisted on celebrating with a business gala. "Mix pleasure with networking," he'd said, already speaking in the cold calculations that would define their second year of marriage. Aaliyah wore emerald silk that night. Her nursing scrubs traded for designer fashion she still felt uncomfortable wearing. She moved through conversations about stock prices and market forecasts, smiling at jokes she didn't understand, playing the perfect billionaire's wife. But behind marble columns and champagne toasts, deals worth millions changed hands with handshakes. And the deal Aaliyah overheard that night was worth something far more precious than money. She'd gone looking for the bathroom when she heard Daniel's voice from behind a partially closed door. He was in a private meeting room with 3 other men, their voices carrying the loose confidence of expensive whiskey. "I'm telling you, Marcus, marriage is just another market to control," Daniel was saying, his words sharp with newfound cynicism. "You establish dominance early, maintain leverage, and always have an exit strategy. Easy to say when your wife worships the ground you walk on, Marcus replied. Aaliyah would do anything for you. That's exactly my point. By our second anniversary, I could hand her divorce papers at dinner and she'd cry like a child. Hell, I'd bet 50 grand on it. You're serious? Dead serious. Women like her, all heart, no strategy, they break beautifully. It's almost artistic. The men laughed, and Aaliyah gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. Through the crack, she could see Daniel's profile as he swirled whiskey in a crystal glass. This was her husband, the man who'd promised to love and protect her. But why would you want to break her? Another voice asked. Control, Daniel said simply. The moment someone loves you more than you love them, you own them. And ownership is the only real security in any relationship. Aaliyah backed away from the door, her heart hammering so loud she was sure someone would hear. She made it to the bathroom just in time to vomit, her body rejecting what her mind had just processed. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger. Designer dress, perfect makeup, diamond wedding ring catching the light. But behind her eyes was something new and dangerous. The birth of someone who refused to be anyone's victim. That night, back in their hotel penthouse, Daniel made love to her with the same passion as always. His hands were gentle, his whispers tender, his body moving against hers with practiced intimacy. But Aaliyah felt every touch differently now. Each kiss was research. Each caress was reconnaissance. She studied him like an opponent, memorizing his weaknesses while pretending to surrender to his strength. I love you, he whispered against her neck as they lay tangled in expensive sheets. I love you too, she replied, the lie tasting like copper in her mouth. 3 words that had once meant everything now felt like weapons waiting to be sharpened. For the next 8 months, Aaliyah perfected the art of loving a man she was learning to hate. She played the devoted wife while secretly meeting with lawyers, investigators, and financial advisors. She smiled at his colleagues while copying files from his home office. She attended his business dinners while recording conversations on her phone. Every "I love you" became ammunition. Every intimate moment became intelligence gathering. Every day she didn't confront him was another day to build an unbreakable case. The morning of their second anniversary, Daniel kissed her goodbye like always, completely unaware that his perfect victim had become his perfect enemy. See you tonight, beautiful, he said, straightening his tie in their bedroom mirror. I have something special planned. So do I, Aaliyah replied, watching him leave through their penthouse windows. 3 words changed everything. She'll definitely cry. But as Aaliyah had lain in his arms that night in Dallas, listening to his satisfied breathing, she'd made a promise to herself. When the tears finally came, they wouldn't be hers. For 8 months, she perfected the art of loving a man she was learning to hate. Every kiss was research. Every smile was reconnaissance. Their Tribeca penthouse showcased their success. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Hudson River. Modern art worth more than most people's homes. But the most expensive thing in that apartment was the lie they were both living. Aaliyah had become a master of deception, her nursing background serving her well in reading people's vital signs. She could tell when Daniel was lying by the slight increase in his pulse when she kissed his neck. She knew when he was planning something by the way he hummed while shaving. She'd mapped every tell, every weakness, every pressure point. Have you ever had to pretend everything was normal while your world was falling apart? How did you maintain the facade? Share your survival story, because what Aaliyah did next required more strength than most people possess. The kitchen became her war room. While Daniel thought she was preparing breakfast, Aaliyah was photographing documents he'd left on the counter. Bank statements showing offshore accounts. Contracts with clauses that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Evidence of the pattern Marcus had laughed about. Daniel's previous victims scattered across multiple states. You're up early, Daniel said, walking into the kitchen in his silk pajamas, pressing a kiss to her shoulder as she stood at the coffee machine. Couldn't sleep, she replied, leaning back into his embrace while forwarding financial documents to her lawyer's encrypted email. Must be excitement about tonight. About that, Daniel said, his arms tightening around her waist. "I made reservations somewhere special. Lil Bernardine's private dining room." Aaliyah's blood chilled. An audience. He wanted witnesses for her humiliation. "Sounds romantic," she managed, turning in his arms to face him. The man looking back at her was handsome, successful, completely convinced of his own brilliance. "Just us. A few friends might join us. You know how these anniversary celebrations go." She kissed him then, deeply enough to make him groan against her lips. What he didn't know was that she was memorizing this moment. The last time she would touch him without him knowing exactly who she'd become. "I can't wait," she whispered, her hands sliding down his chest. "I have something special planned too." Daniel's eyes darkened with desire and anticipation. What kind of special? The kind that changes everything. That afternoon, while Daniel was at his office arranging her destruction, Aaliyah sat in a downtown cafe with Sarah Chun, the woman who'd flown in from Houston with 8 years of documentation about Daniel's previous crimes. "You sure you're ready for this?" Sarah asked, sliding a manila envelope across the small table. "Once you open that door, there's no going back." "He opened it first when he decided to bet on my tears," Aaliyah replied, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Tell me about Houston." Sarah's smile held no warmth. Daniel Morrison was Daniel Matthews then. Small-time real estate investor with big dreams and flexible ethics. I was his first wife. For exactly 18 months. Long enough for him to transfer my family's ranch into his name. Long enough to liquidate my trust fund. Long enough to perfect his system of emotional manipulation. Aaliyah's hands clenched around her coffee cup. The divorce was brutal. He used my emotions against me every step of the way. Made me believe I was crazy, paranoid, ungrateful. By the time I understood what he'd done, he'd disappeared with everything I'd inherited from my grandparents. "How did you find him?" "I never stopped looking. And when his engagement to you hit the society pages, I knew he was about to do it again." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes intense. "That's his pattern. Find a strong woman with something valuable, money, connections, reputation. Make her love him completely, then destroy her publicly while taking everything she has. But I don't have money. My family. Your husband's about to receive a $2 billion government contract for his tech platform. Guess whose name is on the patent applications? Yours. He's been transferring assets into your name for months, setting you up to take the fall for fraud charges while he disappears with clean money." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too warm. Aaliyah struggled to breathe as the full scope of Daniel's plan became clear. "How long do we have?" "The FBI raids his offices tomorrow morning. Unless we stop this tonight, you'll be arrested as his co-conspirator by noon." That evening, as Aaliyah prepared for what Daniel believed would be her final performance, she felt strangely calm. The black dress she'd chosen was simple, elegant, appropriate for either a romantic dinner or a funeral. In the bathroom mirror, she practiced expressions. Surprise for when he presented the divorce papers. Hurt when she realized it was all a show. And finally, the smile she would wear when she handed him his real surprise. The silver box sat on their dresser, containing 8 years of Sarah's evidence, financial records proving the fraud, and documentation that would destroy Daniel's empire within hours. Daniel appeared in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks. "Ready, beautiful? More than you know," she replied, picking up the box. "What's that?" "Your anniversary present. I thought we could open gifts together tonight, in front of your friends." Daniel's smile was predatory, completely unaware that he was walking into an ambush he'd spent months planning for someone else. As they rode to the restaurant in silence, Aaliyah thought about the last 8 months of careful deception. Every morning, she'd kissed him goodbye. Every evening, she'd welcomed him home. Every night, she made love to him while planning his downfall. Tomorrow, the newspapers would call it the greatest financial takedown in Wall Street history. But tonight, it was just a woman refusing to be anyone's victim. The restaurant lights appeared through the limousine windows, and Aaliyah felt the final pieces of her plan clicking into place. Game time. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but Aaliyah discovered it tastes better when seasoned with justice and serve in front of an audience. Anniversary morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Manhattan look like a movie set. Golden sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as Daniel and Aaliyah moved through their final morning routine like actors who'd memorized their blocking. When you know a relationship is ending, does the last kiss taste different? Have you ever had a moment where desire and hatred existed in the same heartbeat? Because what happened next proves that some performances require method acting. In their bedroom, Daniel stood before the mirror adjusting his tie. Italian silk, midnight blue, chosen specifically for tonight's victory. He'd been planning this moment for months, and his reflection showed the confidence of a man who'd never lost a calculated risk. "Big day?" Aaliyah asked, watching him from their bed where she sat in her silk robe, coffee in hand, the perfect picture of domestic contentment. "The biggest," Daniel replied, his smile sharp with anticipation. "Tonight's going to change everything." He had no idea how right he was. Aaliyah rose and walked to him, her bare feet silent on the heated marble floor. She straightened his tie with gentle fingers, her touch making him close his eyes in satisfaction. "I love watching you get ready for important meetings," she said, her voice soft with apparent affection. "You get this look like you're about to conquer the world." "Not the world," Daniel said, his hands settling on her waist. "Just one very specific victory." She kissed him then, deeply enough to make his breath catch. What he tasted as desire was actually goodbye. 8 months of careful planning culminating in this final intimate moment. "I should let you finish getting ready," she whispered against his lips. "But tonight, after your big meeting, I want you all to myself." "Deal," Daniel agreed, already imagining how the evening would unfold. By midnight, he'd be $50,000 richer and free from the burden of pretending to love someone he'd only ever seen as a mark. After he left for his office, Aaliyah moved through the penthouse like a general preparing for war. Every surface had been cleared of anything sentimental. Every photograph of their life together had been carefully packed away. By tomorrow, she'd never see this place again. The silver gift box sat on the kitchen counter, containing the evidence that would end Daniel's empire. But Sarah's overnight delivery had added one more surprise. Federal marshals would be stationed outside the restaurant, ready to arrest Daniel the moment Aaliyah gave the signal. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "FBI confirmed raids for tomorrow 6 a.m. All accounts frozen. You sure about tonight?" Aaliyah typed back. "He wants an audience for my humiliation. He'll get one for his." At his downtown office, Daniel was orchestrating his own version of the evening's events. Marcus had confirmed the reservation, the other witnesses were briefed, and the divorce papers sat in his briefcase like a loaded gun. "You really going through with this?" his assistant Jennifer asked, reviewing the legal documents. "She seems like a nice woman." "Nice doesn't win in business," Daniel replied, signing the papers with a flourish. "And marriage is just another business transaction. Tonight, I closed this deal permanently." What Daniel didn't know was that Jennifer had been forwarding copies of every document to a federal prosecutor for the past 3 months. His assistant's husband was an FBI agent who'd been building a case against Daniel's shell companies. The afternoon stretched like a hell breath. Aaliyah spent at a spa, getting her hair and makeup done with the precision of someone preparing for battle. The woman in the salon chair looked calm, pampered, completely unsuspecting. But her eyes held the focus of someone about to change her entire life. Meanwhile, Daniel had lunch with Marcus at their usual club, running through the evening's timeline like coaches before the big game. The table's set for 8. Marcus reported over aged whiskey. "Everyone's confirmed. Jameson's bringing his camera. He wants to record it for posterity." "Perfect," Daniel said, savoring the burn of expensive liquor. "I want every detail documented. This is going to be legendary. You ever wonder what you'll do after? I mean, once you're free?" Daniel's laugh was cold. "Same thing I always do. Find the next opportunity and maximize profit. There are plenty of women like Aaliyah out there, smart enough to be useful, trusting enough to be controlled." Neither man noticed the FBI agent at the bar recording their conversation. As evening approached, both Daniel and Aaliyah prepared for battle from their respective positions. He packed his briefcase with divorce papers and contracts designed to leave her with nothing. She checked her purse one final time, the silver box secure, her phone programmed with the federal prosecutor's direct line. The limousine ride to Lou Bernardine passed in silence, both lost in their own thoughts about what the next hour would bring. Daniel's hand rested possessively on Aaliyah's thigh, while his mind calculated angles and outcomes. Aaliyah stared out at the Manhattan lights, thinking about the woman she'd been 8 months ago and the person she'd had to become to survive. Nervous? Daniel asked as they pulled up to the restaurant. Excited, Aaliyah replied, and for the first time in months, she was being completely honest. Inside, Lou Bernardine, the private dining room buzzed with expectation. Wall Street's finest had gathered to witness what they thought would be a woman's breakdown. The champagne was chilled, the cameras were ready, and $50,000 sat stacked on the table like blood money. Daniel squeezed Aaliyah's hand as they approached the door. "Ready for our big moment?" "I've been ready for 8 months, she said, her smile holding secrets he couldn't imagine. As they entered the room full of witnesses, neither realized they weren't the only ones playing games. Someone else had been watching, waiting, and planning a move that would checkmate them both. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the most expensive dinner in Manhattan history was about to begin. The most expensive restaurant in Manhattan became a theater where 2 people performed their final act, unaware that the real show was about to begin. Lou Bernardine's private dining room glowed with crystal and wealth. 8 men in $1,000 suits sat around a table that cost more than most cars, their champagne glasses catching light from chandeliers that had witnessed decades of power deals and broken promises. But tonight was different. Tonight they'd come to watch a woman's heartbreak for sport. What's the most shocking revelation you've ever witnessed? Have you seen someone's world collapse in real time? How did it feel to watch? Because what happened next changed everything these men thought they knew about power. Daniel guided Aaliyah to her chair with the confidence of a man who'd already won. Around the table, his friends smiled like wolves watching fresh meat walk into their den. The stack of cash sat between the wine glasses and bread plates, $50,000 betting against one woman's strength. "Gentlemen," Daniel announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding rooms, "thank you all for joining us on this special evening." Marcus raised his glass. To Daniel and Aaliyah, "May tonight be everything you planned." The men drank. Aaliyah smiled, and somewhere in her purse, her phone recorded every word. "Before we order," Aaliyah said, her voice cutting through the masculine laughter, "I have something for my husband." She placed the silver box on the table between them. The room fell silent except for the soft clink of ice settling in water glasses. Daniel's confidence flickered for just a moment. This wasn't part of his script. "What's this, sweetheart?" "Your anniversary present. Open it." "Ladies first," Daniel said, reaching for his briefcase. "I have something for you too." "I insist," Aaliyah replied, her tone sweet but unmovable. "Mine first." Around the table, the men leaned forward. They'd come for entertainment, and the tension between husband and wife was already better than anything they'd expected. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he lifted the box's lid. Inside, photographs scattered like playing cards, financial documents, USB drives, and on top, a handwritten note that made his face drain of all color. "I know about the bet. I know about Houston. I know about her." The signature belonged to someone Daniel thought he'd left buried in his past. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Justice," Aaliyah said simply. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? About the bet? About your plan to destroy me in front of your friends?" Marcus grabbed the photographs, his eyes widening as he flipped through images of bank records, forged documents, and other women, Daniel's previous victims spanning multiple states. "Danny, these are federal crimes," Marcus breathed. "How did she—" "Because she's not the first," a voice interrupted from across the room. Every head turned toward the corner booth where a woman with auburn hair had been sitting unnoticed all evening. She stood now, moving toward their table with the grace of someone who'd planned this moment for years. "Hello, Danny," Sarah Chun said, her southern accent cutting through the Manhattan sophistication like a blade. Or should I call you Daniel Matthews? That was your name when you married me in Houston 8 years ago. The room exploded into chaos. Chairs scraped against marble floors as men stood, champagne glasses forgotten, phones appearing to record what was clearly about to become the scandal of the year. Daniel tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. Sarah, you're dead. I mean, the car accident. You mean the car accident you arranged? Sarah's smile held no warmth. The brake lines you paid to have cut? Sorry to disappoint you, but I've been very much alive and very busy building a case against you. Aaliyah watched her husband's face cycle through emotions. Shock, fear, desperate calculation. This was the moment she'd planned for 8 months, but seeing him broken still twisted something in her chest. You want to know about the bed? Aaliyah asked, her voice steady despite the storm in her heart. My husband wagered $50,000 that he could make me cry tonight. He planned to serve me divorce papers in front of all of you, then walk away with your money and my dignity. She stood, her black dress making her look like a judge delivering a verdict. But here's what Daniel didn't know. I've been recording his conversations for 8 months. I have evidence of fraud, tax evasion, identity theft, and attempted murder. The FBI is building their case as we speak. That's impossible, Daniel gasped. You're just a nurse. You don't have the resources. You're right, I didn't, Aaliyah agreed. But she did. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed the room a live video feed. Those federal agents outside, they've been waiting for my signal. One word from me, and Daniel Morrison becomes Daniel Matthews again, in handcuffs. The men around the table looked like they'd stumbled into a movie they didn't understand. The entertainment they'd come for had become a federal case unfolding in real time. What do you want? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Well, I've always wanted, Sarah replied. Justice. For me, for Aaliyah, and for the 6 other women you've destroyed over the past decade. Aaliyah reached into her purse and pulled out divorce papers. Real ones, prepared by federal prosecutors as part of a plea agreement. The bet was that I'd cry tonight, she said, placing the documents in front of her husband. Well, congratulations, Daniel. You're about to see tears. As if on cue, tears began streaming down Daniel's face. The choice is simple, Aaliyah continued. Sign these papers, agree to testify against your co-conspirators, and maybe the federal prosecutors will recommend 15 years instead of life. And if I don't, Sarah smiled. Then we let the cameras rolling outside catch you being arrested for attempted murder, fraud, and bigamy. Your choice. Around the table, $50,000 sat forgotten as the most powerful men in Manhattan watched one of their own face consequences for the first time in his life. Daniel picked up the pen with shaking hands. I loved you, he whispered to Aaliyah. No, she replied, her voice gentle but final. You loved controlling me. There's a difference. As he signed away everything he'd built through lies and manipulation, Daniel finally understood the difference between winning and surviving. And the woman he'd tried to destroy was teaching him the hardest lesson of his life. Every marriage has secrets, but some secrets have teeth, and Daniel was about to learn that his biggest secret had been feeding on lies for years. The elegant restaurant atmosphere turned poisonous as accusations flew across crystal and marble. Around them, Manhattan's elite fumbled for their phones, recording what would become the most viewed scandal video in Wall Street history. But Aaliyah wasn't watching the chaos. Her eyes were fixed on Sarah Chun, the woman who'd emerged from Daniel's past like a ghost seeking revenge. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you knew completely was a stranger? What's worse, being lied to or learning you weren't the only one being deceived? Because what Aaliyah learned next shattered everything she thought she understood about her own story. Before you celebrate too much, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the room's tension. There's something else you need to know. She pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table to Aaliyah. On the screen was a marriage certificate dated 8 years earlier. Daniel Matthews and Sarah Elizabeth Chun witnessed and filed in Harris County, Texas. We were never divorced, Sarah said simply, which makes your marriage to him completely illegal. The room went silent, except for the sound of Aaliyah's world reshaping itself. She stared at the document, her mind racing through implications she hadn't considered. "That's impossible," Daniel protested, but his voice carried no conviction. "We filed papers." "You filed fake papers," Sarah interrupted. "Just like you filed fake death certificates when you tried to have me killed. Just like you filed fake everything your entire adult life." Aaliyah felt like she was falling through space. "So, I was never really married? Legally?" "No, which means you have no claim to his assets, no protection under spousal privilege laws, and no legal standing in any of his business dealings." Marcus leaned forward, understanding dawning on his face. "But if she was never legally married, then the prenup means nothing," Sarah finished. "Every business contract Daniel signed using spousal assets, every tax filing claiming married status, every financial arrangement based on their marriage, all fraudulent." The federal implications crashed over the room like a wave. These weren't just personal betrayals anymore. They were witnessing systematic fraud spanning multiple jurisdictions. "Which brings us to the real reason I'm here," Sarah continued, her eyes never leaving Daniel's face. "The FBI doesn't just want him for what he did to us. They want him because he's been using fake marriages to launder money for some very dangerous people." She pressed a button on her tablet, and new images appeared. Bank transfers, shell companies, names that made the men around the table go pale. "Gentlemen, meet your business partner's real investors. Russian oligarchs, cartel money, arms dealers." Daniel's been washing their cash through fake marriages and legitimate businesses for years. Aaliyah gripped the table edge to keep from falling. "The foundation we started. Blood money," Sarah confirmed. "Every donation, every grant, every dollar that came through his companies, tainted." The weight of it hit Aaliyah like a physical blow. She'd thought she was exposing a cruel husband. Instead, she'd uncovered an international criminal operation. "How long have you known?" she asked Sarah. "About Daniel's real business?" 3 years. "About you?" "Since your engagement announcement hit the newspapers." "And you let me marry him?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "I try to warn you. Anonymous tips to your workplace. Messages to your email that kept getting blocked. Even showing up at your wedding, security removed me before I could speak to you." Aaliyah remembered now. The woman in the parking lot who'd tried to approach her after their rehearsal dinner. Security had called her a stalker, and Daniel had comforted his shaken bride with gentle lies. "Every time I try to reach you, he intercepted it," Sarah continued. "So I decided to wait, let you discover who he really was, then give you the tools to destroy him properly." "Tools?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time that evening, it held genuine warmth. "Honey, do you think the FBI just happened to start investigating Daniel Morrison? I've been feeding them evidence for 2 years. You weren't just gathering information for yourself. You were completing their case." The room spun around Aaliyah as she realized the scope of what had been happening. She hadn't been playing one game. She'd been a piece in someone else's larger strategy. "The recordings I made, the documents I copied, all went straight to federal prosecutors. Every photo you took, every conversation you documented, every piece of evidence you thought you were gathering for your divorce. It was building a RICO case." Daniel finally found his voice. "You used her. Like you used her." Sarah shot back. "At least I was trying to save her life. You were planning to frame her for your crimes and disappear while she faced prison time." She turned back to Aaliyah. "That government contract worth $2 billion? The one with your name on the patents? Those weren't just assets he was stealing. They were evidence of treason, selling classified technology to foreign powers." The men around the table began edging toward the door, suddenly realizing they were witnesses to something far beyond financial crimes. "Nobody leaves," Sarah said calmly, pressing another button on her tablet. Federal agents are already stationed at every exit. As if summoned by her words, the restaurant doors opened and FBI agents in Kevlar vests entered the dining room. "Daniel Morrison," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, bigamy, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit treason." But Aaliyah wasn't watching her fake husband get handcuffed. She was staring at Sarah, finally understanding the woman who'd orchestrated this entire evening. "Who are you really?" she whispered. Sarah's smile turned predatory. "Special Agent Sarah Chun, FBI, Financial Crimes Division. And honey, this investigation is just getting started." The woman Aaliyah thought had saved her was actually the one who'd been controlling her all along. Some people bury their past so deep they forget others might have shovels. Daniel's foundation was built on someone else's grave, and now she was rising from the dead. 3 hours later, the private dining room had been transformed into a federal crime scene. Evidence bags covered the table where champagne glasses once sparkled. FBI agents photographed everything while Manhattan's most powerful men gave statements to prosecutors who'd probably dream about this case for years. But Aaliyah sat alone in a corner booth, staring at photos that rewrote her entire understanding of the past 3 years. How would you react to learning you weren't unique to someone who made you feel special? Would you work with their ex to expose them, or walk away? Share your thoughts, because what came next proved that some truths are harder to swallow than others. Agent Sarah Chun slid into the booth across from her, no longer pretending to be just another victim. Her FBI badge lay on the table between them like a confession. "I know you have questions," Sarah said, her southern accent softer now, but no less cutting. "Start with Houston," Aaliyah replied, her voice hollow. "Tell me who Daniel really was before he became my husband." Sarah pulled out a case file thick with photographs and documents. Daniel Matthews, small-time real estate scammer with big dreams and flexible morals. He targeted women with assets, land, inheritance, business connections, anything he could steal and flip. She spread photos across the table. Maria Santos, a rancho en El Paso. Jennifer Walsh, heir to a shipping fortune in Galveston. Rebecca Kim, tech startup founder in Austin. 6 women over 8 years, all the same pattern. Aaliyah studied the faces, different ages, backgrounds, ethnicities, but all sharing the same expression in their final photos. The hollow look of someone who'd been completely broken. What happened to them? Maria lost her family's cattle ranch, died by suicide 6 months later. Jennifer's shipping business went bankrupt. She's working minimum wage in Phoenix now. Rebecca's startup patents were stolen. She's fighting legal battles she can't afford to win. Each story hit Aaliyah like a physical blow. "And you?" Sarah's laugh held no humor. "I was the prototype, the test case where he perfected his system." She pulled out wedding photos. A younger Daniel and Sarah smiling on courthouse steps in Houston. They looked genuinely happy, completely in love. "We met at a charity auction. I was selling my late grandmother's jewelry collection to pay for nursing school. He was this charming businessman who outbid everyone else, then gave me the pieces back as a gift." The romantic gesture sounded familiar. Daniel had done something similar during their own courtship. Bought her mother's wedding ring from a pawn shop where Aaliyah had sold it to pay rent. "Let me guess," Aaliyah said bitterly. "He made you feel like the most special woman in the world. Until our wedding night, when I discovered he'd forged documents transferring my grandmother's property into his name. 1,700 acres of prime oil land, worth about $40 million. What did you do?" What any trusting wife would do. I confronted him, demanded explanations, threatened to call lawyers. Sarah's eyes grew distant. "He convinced me I was being paranoid. Showed me fake legal documents proving everything was legitimate. Made me feel crazy for questioning him." Aaliyah recognized the manipulation tactics. Daniel had used similar strategies whenever she'd questioned his business dealings. "How long before you realized the truth?" 18 months. Long enough for him to liquidate everything and disappear. "I came home one day to an empty house and divorce papers claiming I'd abandoned him." "But you said you were never divorced." "Those papers were fake too. Filed in a county that didn't exist, signed by a judge who'd been dead for 3 years. I spent 2 years trying to prove our marriage was still legal while he moved to Silicon Valley and built his tech empire with my family's money." The scope of Daniel's deception was staggering. "How did you become FBI?" Sarah's smile turned sharp. "Funny thing about having your entire life destroyed by fraud. It gives you motivation to understand how fraud works. I enrolled in law school, specialized in financial crimes, applied to the bureau. Just to catch him, and everyone like him. But yes, Daniel was always the end game. Aaliyah processed this information while watching crime scene text bag evidence from their anniversary dinner. So, when you saw my engagement announcement, I knew exactly what was going to happen to you. Every move he'd make, every manipulation he'd use, every way he'd try to destroy you. Then why didn't you stop it? Why let me go through this? Sarah leaned forward, her voice intense. Because stopping it wouldn't have been enough. I needed him to reveal the full scope of his operation. The fake marriages were just the beginning. He's been laundering money for international criminal organizations. She pulled out surveillance photos showing Daniel meeting with men Aaliyah didn't recognize. Arms dealers, drug cartels, human traffickers. Your husband wasn't just stealing from wives. He was helping fund some of the worst people on earth. The revelation made Aaliyah's stomach turn. Every kiss, every intimate moment, every I love you had been shared with someone far more dangerous than she'd imagined. The foundation we started was going to be his next laundering operation. Clean money going to help communities, dirty money coming in through fake donations and grants. Aaliyah thought about all the families they planned to help, all the medical clinics that would have been built with blood money. How deep does this go? Deep enough that taking him down properly required someone on the inside. Someone he trusted completely. The weight of understanding settled over Aaliyah like a heavy blanket. I wasn't just his victim. I was your asset. You were my partner, Sarah corrected, whether you knew it or not. Across the restaurant, Daniel sat in handcuffs while federal prosecutors read charges that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life. But Aaliyah felt no satisfaction. Only the hollow ache of learning that even her revenge had been someone else's strategy. What happens now, she asked. Sarah's answer would change everything. Now we go after the people who've been paying him. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but multiply that by two women who refuse to be anyone's victim, and you get something far more dangerous than fury. You get justice. The federal building in Lower Manhattan hummed with activity at midnight. Through reinforced windows, Aaliyah could see the city lights of a world that had no idea how close it had come to funding international terrorism through community medical clinics. She sat in a conference room that smelled like strong coffee and determination, surrounded by FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and enough evidence to topple governments. Have you ever found strength in unexpected places? Sometimes our greatest allies come from our worst situations. Who helped you when you thought you were alone? Because what happened next proved that survival sometimes requires the strangest partnerships. Agent Sarah Chun spread files across the conference table like a dealer shuffling cards loaded with secrets. Each folder represented years of investigation, thousands of hours of surveillance, and dozens of victims who'd never received justice. The Daniel Morrison you married was just the latest identity, Sarah explained, her FBI badge now worn openly. Before that, he was David Martinez in Phoenix, Douglas Miller in Denver, and at least 4 other names we've confirmed. Aaliyah studied surveillance photos showing her husband. Different haircuts, different clothes, but always the same predatory smile. How many women? 14 that we know of. Probably more we haven't found yet. The number hit like a physical blow. Aaliyah had thought herself special, unique, the one woman who'd seen through his lies. Instead, she was just number 14 in an assembly line of victims. But here's what makes your case different, Sarah continued, pulling out financial records that made the prosecutors lean forward. Daniel got greedy. Instead of just stealing from you and disappearing, he tried to use your marriage for something bigger. She pointed to bank transfers that looked like hieroglyphics to Aaliyah, but clearly meant something significant to the federal agents. These are payments from the Kozlov organization. Russian arms dealers wanted by Interpol. This is cartel money from the Hernandez family out of Juarez. This is blood diamond funding from conflicts in 3 different African nations. What were they paying him for? Access to American government contracts. Your husband's tech platform wasn't just processing medical information. It was a backdoor into federal databases. The room went silent as the implications sank in. Aaliyah had been married to someone selling American secrets to enemies of the state. The $2 billion government contract, she whispered, would have given him access to classified military communications, intelligence networks, homeland security protocols. Sarah's voice carried the weight of prevented catastrophe. If that contract had gone through, Daniel could have sold state secrets worth hundreds of billions. Aaliyah gripped her coffee cup to stop her hands from shaking. And my name was on the patents. Making you the perfect fall guy when everything collapsed. He disappears with clean money. You go to prison for treason. The lead prosecutor, a stern woman named Director Martinez, leaned forward. Which brings us to why you're here instead of in protective custody. We need your help, Sarah said simply. Daniel's arrest tonight was just the beginning. The real criminals, his buyers, are still out there. What kind of help? Director Martinez opened another file. Daniel's trial starts in 6 months. His lawyers will try to pin everything on co-conspirators, claim he was manipulated by criminal organizations, maybe even suggest you were the mastermind. That's ridiculous. Is it? Sarah interrupted. You're the one who gathered all the evidence. You're the one who orchestrated tonight's takedown. A good defense attorney could make you look like the criminal genius who used Daniel as a front. The possibility hadn't occurred to Aaliyah, but she could see how the narrative might work. Wife discovers husband's crimes, blackmails him, takes over his operation. What do you want me to do? Go back to your normal life, Director Martinez said. Let Daniel's contacts approach you. They'll assume you're now in control of his operations. You want me to pretend to be a criminal? We want you to help us catch criminals who are far more dangerous than your husband ever was. Sarah pulled out photographs that made Aaliyah's blood run cold. Arms shipments, human trafficking routes, drug distribution networks, all connected to the money that had been flowing through Daniel's accounts. These people won't just disappear because we arrested Daniel. They'll find new partners, new ways to move money, new methods to access American systems. Unless we catch them first, Director Martinez added. And for that, we need someone they trust. Someone already inside Daniel's network. Aaliyah studied the faces around the table. Federal agents who devoted their careers to fighting international crime, prosecutors who could have made more money in private practice but chose justice instead. What makes you think I can do this? Sarah's smile held genuine admiration. Honey, you've been undercover for 8 months without even knowing it. You gathered evidence that professional agents couldn't access, gained information that surveillance couldn't capture, and maintained your cover so perfectly that Daniel never suspected a thing. That was different. I was fighting for my own survival. And now you'd be fighting for everyone else's. Director Martinez pulled out contracts that looked like employment agreements. The FBI is offering you a position as a confidential informant. Full legal protection, complete immunity for any past unknowing participation in Daniel's crimes, and a chance to make sure no other woman goes through what you experienced. Aaliyah thought about the photos Sarah had shown her. 14 women whose lives had been destroyed by the same man who'd whispered, "I love you," in her ear. What about my safety? 24-hour protection, new identity if necessary, relocation assistance. And if I say no, then you go into witness protection immediately. And these criminals find new ways to hurt innocent people. The choice was simple but terrifying. Return to a life that had been built on lies and use those lies to catch monsters, or disappear into safety while knowing she could have made a difference. Aaliyah picked up the pen. What I need to know. Sarah's smile was fierce with approval. Everything. As she signed documents that would make her an official ally in the fight against international crime, Aaliyah realized something that surprised her. For the first time in 8 months, building an empire takes decades. Destroying one takes determination, evidence, and 2 women who refuse to let a predator hide behind success. Dawn broke over Manhattan like a reckoning. By 6 a.m., FBI agents were executing search warrants across 3 states while news vans surrounded Daniel Morrison's corporate headquarters like hungry wolves. Aaliyah watched it all from the 20th floor of the federal building, sipping coffee that tasted like victory and exhaustion. On the screens around her, Daniel's empire collapsed in real time. Have you ever watched someone's downfall and felt conflicted, satisfied but also sad? How do you separate justice from revenge? Tell me your thoughts, because what happened next proved that some victories come with prices you never expected to pay. Morrison Industries stock has dropped 90% in 2 hours, Agent Shin reported, monitoring financial markets while federal raids played out on multiple news channels. Trading's been suspended indefinitely. The headquarters building that had once symbolized Daniel's success now buzzed with chaos. Employees carried boxes of personal belongings past news cameras, their careers ended by a boss they'd never really known. Any word from his lawyers? Director Martinez asked. Radio silence, though that might change once they realized the scope of the charges. Aaliyah studied surveillance footage from Daniel's holding cell. Her husband, former husband, she reminded herself, sat on a narrow bench staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Gone was the confident businessman who'd kissed her goodbye 18 hours earlier. In his place was a broken man facing life in federal prison. Having second thoughts? Sarah asked, settling into the chair beside her. About helping you catch his associates? No, about. Aaliyah paused, searching for words to describe the complex emotions watching someone you once loved face total destruction. I keep thinking about the man I met in New Orleans, the one who danced with me and made me believe in fairy tales. That man never existed, Sarah said gently. What you fell in love with was a performance designed to manipulate you. I know that, but the feelings were real, even if he wasn't. On the screen, Daniel looked up at the security camera as if he could see through it to where she sat watching. For just a moment, his expression held something that looked like genuine regret. Aaliyah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Morrison, we need to talk. Your husband's business partners are very concerned about recent developments. She showed the message to Sarah, who immediately began tracing the source. That was fast. Usually takes a few days for the vultures to circle. What do I do? Exactly what we discussed. You're the grieving wife who suddenly discovered her husband's crimes. You're angry, betrayed, and looking for answers. Director Martinez handed her a script they prepared. Remember, you know nothing about the international connections. As far as you're concerned, Daniel was just stealing money for himself. The phone rang. Aaliyah answered on the third ring, her voice carefully shaky. Hello, Mrs. Morrison? This is Victor Kozlov. I believe we have mutual interest to discuss. The name from the FBI files made Aaliyah's blood chill. Victor Kozlov, arms dealer, human trafficker, wanted by law enforcement agencies across 4 continents. I don't know who you are, she said, following the script while FBI technicians recorded every word. My husband's been arrested, and I'm trying to understand what he's done to our life. Your husband was a valuable business partner. His departure creates certain complications that affect us both. What kind of complications? The kind that are better discussed in person. Are you familiar with the restaurant La Grenouille? Tonight, 8 p.m. Sarah was already coordinating surveillance teams while Aaliyah maintained her performance. I don't think I should be meeting strangers while my husband is facing federal charges. Mrs. Morrison, with respect, you have very little choice in the matter. Your name appears on several business documents that my associates would prefer remain private. The threat was clear, but politely delivered. Aaliyah was in this whether she wanted to be or not. What kind of documents? The kind that make you a partner in enterprises worth considerably more than your husband's technology company. 8 p.m., Mrs. Morrison. Come alone. The line went dead. Around the conference room, FBI agents moved with the focused intensity of people who'd just been handed their biggest break in years. La Grenouille is perfect, Sarah said, pulling up building plans on her tablet. 5 points of entry, excellent sight lines for surveillance, private dining rooms where we can record everything. He's not going to confess to crimes on a first meeting, Aaliyah pointed out. No, but he'll reveal enough to justify deeper surveillance. And if he thinks you're taking over Daniel's operation, he might offer you deals that expose his entire network. Director Martinez was already coordinating with international law enforcement. That evening, As Aaliyah prepared for the most dangerous dinner of her life, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 18 hours ago, she'd been a betrayed wife seeking personal revenge. Now she was an FBI asset preparing to infiltrate international organized crime. Her black dress was elegant but unremarkable. Her purse contained recording devices and a panic button. Her wedding ring, fake as the marriage it represented, caught the light like a promise of the justice she was about to deliver. As she walked toward La Grenouille, federal agents positioned throughout the neighborhood, Aaliyah realized something that surprised her. She was no longer afraid of dangerous men. She was becoming one herself. Just when Aaliyah thought she'd won the war, she discovered that some battles have casualties you never see coming. And Daniel's last move was the cruelest of all. La Grenouille's private dining room glowed with candlelight and conspiracy. Viktor Kozlov sat across from Aaliyah like a spider who'd found a particularly interesting fly. His accent carried the weight of old money and older crimes. "Your husband spoke of you often," he said, cutting his steak with surgical precision, though he failed to mention how capable you appear to be. Is winning worth it if you lose yourself in the process? When does justice become revenge? And when does revenge consume the avenger? Share your perspective, because what Aaliyah discovered next changed everything she thought she knew about winning. Around her waist, hidden recording devices captured every word, while FBI agents positioned throughout the restaurant monitored the conversation that could topple international criminal networks. "Daniel didn't tell me much about his business associates," Aaliyah replied, following the script they'd rehearsed. "I'm still discovering the scope of what he was involved in." Victor's smile held no warmth. "Your husband was facilitating certain transactions between my organization and American government systems. Very profitable arrangements that his arrest has unfortunately complicated." "What kind of arrangements?" "The kind that require continued access to federal databases. Access that was guaranteed through his technology contracts." Aaliyah sipped her wine while her mind raced. This was the confession they needed. Direct admission of purchasing classified American information. "I don't understand technology the way Daniel did," she said carefully. "But I imagine those contracts are worthless now that he's been arrested." "Not necessarily. The patents remain active, the government contracts are still valid, and ownership has transferred to his surviving spouse." The words hit Aaliyah like ice water. Surviving spouse? Victor's expression didn't change, but something predatory flickered in his eyes. "You haven't heard? Daniel Morrison died in federal custody 3 hours ago." Apparent suicide. The restaurant spun around her. Through her earpiece, she could hear FBI agents scrambling to confirm information that couldn't possibly be true. "That's impossible. I was just watching surveillance footage this morning." "Yes, we're aware of your cooperation with federal authorities." The bottom dropped out of Aaliyah's world. They knew Victor and his organization had been watching her, monitoring FBI communications, playing a game with rules she hadn't even known existed. "Daniel's death is unfortunate but not unexpected," Victor continued, his voice clinical. "Men under pressure often make permanent solutions to temporary problems. However, his business obligations survive him. I don't want anything to do with." "Mrs. Morrison, you misunderstand. This is not a negotiation." He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen were photographs that made her blood freeze. Her mother in her Atlanta apartment, unaware she was being watched. Her sister leaving work at the hospital. Her brother walking his children to school. "Your husband's debts have become your debts. His obligations are now your obligations. And his very expensive mistakes require expensive solutions." Aaliyah forced herself to breathe while her world crumbled around her. Daniel was dead. Her cover was blown. And the people she loved most were in immediate danger. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing we wanted from your husband. Access to American military databases through your technology patents. Cooperation with our business model. And absolute silence about our arrangements." Through her earpiece, she heard Sarah's voice. "Stay calm. We're moving to extract you now." But Victor was already standing, his dinner barely touched. "You have 24 hours to consider our proposal. After that, We begin collecting debts in ways that are considerably less pleasant than dinner conversation. And if I refuse, then you join your husband in making permanent solutions to temporary problems. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had already consumed everything she'd built. As Victor left the restaurant, Aaliyah sat alone at a table set for conspiracy, realizing that her victory over Daniel had been someone else's opening move in a much larger game. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Building surrounded. Don't move until we secure the area. But another message appeared from an unknown number. The recording devices were a nice touch. Federal agents make such predictable patterns. Your family's safety depends on your next choice. Aaliyah closed her eyes and thought about the man she'd married, the revenge she'd planned, and the justice she'd thought she was serving. Daniel's death changed everything, but not in the way anyone had expected. He wasn't just a criminal who'd been caught. He was a dead criminal whose debts were now her responsibility. And the people he owed money to didn't care about FBI protection or federal witnesses or women who just wanted their lives back. They cared about results, and they were willing to kill anyone who couldn't deliver them. As federal agents escorted her from the restaurant, Aaliyah realized the cruelest truth of all. Daniel's final betrayal wasn't stealing her money or breaking her heart. It was dying and leaving her alive to face consequences she'd never agreed to accept. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, she was fighting alone. From the ashes of a destroyed marriage, new life was growing. But Aaliyah had to decide whether this child would be raised by a woman who chose love or one who chose vengeance. The federal safe house in Brooklyn felt like a prison made of good intentions. Bulletproof windows, armed guards, and the constant hum of surveillance equipment created a cocoon that protected her body while her mind fought battles no security team could defend against. How do you separate a child from their father's sins? Can something beautiful come from something destructive? Share your thoughts on complicated legacies, because what Aaliyah learned next rewrote everything she thought she knew about motherhood. Dr. Rachel Kim's ultrasound machine hummed quietly in the converted bedroom they turned into a medical facility. The FBI wasn't taking any chances with Aaliyah's safety, which meant even prenatal visits happened under armed guard. Everything looks healthy, Dr. Kim said, her voice carefully neutral. But I need to ask, are you certain about the timeline? Aaliyah stared at the monitor, showing a tiny form moving inside her. What do you mean? Based on the development I'm seeing, conception would have occurred approximately 10 weeks ago. That would place it during the time I was gathering evidence against Daniel. The words felt like stones in her mouth. The doctor nodded sympathetically. I know this is difficult, but given your husband's criminal activities, we need to consider all possibilities. Was there any chance you were drugged or... No. Aaliyah's voice was firm. We were intimate regularly during that period. I was playing the perfect wife while building a case against him. What she didn't say was that some of those intimate moments had been the most confusing of her life. Even knowing Daniel was a criminal, even planning his destruction, her body had still responded to his touch. The pregnancy was proof of the complicated truth that desire and hatred could exist in the same heartbeat. Agent Sarah Chun knocked on the door before entering. How's our patient? Healthy baby, complicated circumstances, Dr. Kim replied, cleaning the ultrasound gel from Aaliyah's stomach. I'll leave you two to discuss security arrangements. After the doctor left, Sarah settled into the chair beside the hospital bed. Victor's organization has been quiet for 3 days. No movement on your family, no attempts to contact you. That doesn't mean anything, does it? It means they're planning something bigger than harassment. My guess is they're waiting to see if you'll cooperate voluntarily before they escalate to violence. Aaliyah placed her hand on her still flat stomach. What kind of world am I bringing this child into? The same world every parent faces, dangerous, complicated, but worth fighting for. This baby's father was a criminal who sold American secrets to arms dealers. Its mother is a federal witness whose testimony could destroy international crime networks. That's not exactly a normal childhood. Sarah's expression softened. My father was an alcoholic who gambled away our house. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I grew up thinking normal families existed only on television. How did you turn out okay? Who says I did? Sarah's laugh held dark humor. I became an FBI agent who spent 6 years planning revenge against one man. But I also chose to use my pain to protect other people. That's what matters. Not where you come from, but what you do with where you've been. Aaliyah thought about the choice facing her. Cooperate with Victor's demands and potentially save her family while betraying her country. Refuse and watch everyone she loved pay the price for Daniel's crimes. There's a third option, Sarah said, reading her expression. We fake your death. What? Victor's organization thinks you're valuable because you control Daniel's assets and technology patents. But if Aaliyah Morrison dies in a car accident or house fire, those assets go into federal seizure while you disappear into witness protection. And my family gets the same protection. New identities, new location, complete severance from your old life. The idea was tempting but terrifying. What about the baby? Grows up safe, free from the legacy of its father's crimes, raised by a mother who chose protection over revenge. Aaliyah closed her eyes and imagined a different life. Small town somewhere in the Midwest, teaching nursing at a local college, raising her child without bodyguards or bulletproof windows. Normal problems like homework and soccer practice instead of international criminal conspiracies. But Victor's organization doesn't just disappear, she said. They find new partners, new ways to access American systems, new people to corrupt. That's not your responsibility anymore, isn't it? How many women like me are out there right now? Married to men they don't really know, being set up for crimes they don't understand. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Fighting those fights means raising your child in a world where danger is always one phone call away. And running means raising my child in a world where bad people face no consequences for destroying lives. The choice crystallized in Aaliyah's mind with sudden clarity. She thought about the photos Sarah had shown her. 14 women whose lives had been destroyed by Daniel's pattern of manipulation. She thought about the arms dealers and human traffickers who were counting on her cooperation to continue their operations. Most of all, she thought about the child growing inside her and the world she wanted that child to inherit. I'm not running, she said finally, but I'm not doing this alone anymore. What do you mean? Aaliyah sat up straighter, decision made. Contact every woman Daniel destroyed. Contact every victim of Victor's organization you can find. Contact every federal agent working international crime cases. Aaliyah, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about building something that lasts. Something that protects people instead of just catching criminals after they've already hurt someone. Sarah smiled with genuine admiration. What are you proposing? A foundation, a real one this time, built on justice instead of blood money. The baby kicked for the first time as Aaliyah spoke, as if agreeing with its mother's decision to fight for a better world. Every story of betrayal ends with a choice. Do you become a monster who hurt you, or do you break the cycle and choose something better? Federal courthouse steps swarmed with reporters as the biggest criminal trial in decades reached its climax. 6 months after Daniel Morrison's death, his criminal network faced justice while the woman he'd tried to destroy stood ready to testify against his international accomplices. When you have the power to destroy someone who hurt you, what makes you choose mercy? Is it weakness or the ultimate strength? Tell me what you would choose, because what happened next redefined everything about justice versus revenge. Aaliyah adjusted her maternity dress as she walked through the media chaos. At 6 months pregnant, she moved with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo into a war zone. Viktor Kozlov sat in the defendant's chair wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes. 3 months of federal investigation had exposed his entire organization: arms dealing, human trafficking, money laundering across 4 continents. But today's testimony wasn't just about Viktor. It was about breaking the cycle that had destroyed so many lives. Mrs. Morrison, the prosecutor began, please tell the court about your first meeting with the defendant. He threatened my family, Aaliyah said, her voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom. He told me that my husband's debts had become my debts, and that cooperation wasn't optional. What did you understand those debts to be? Access to classified American military databases. Information that could be sold to enemies of the United States. Victor's lawyer objected, but the damage was already done. For the next 3 hours, Aaliyah detailed every conversation, every threat, every piece of evidence that proved Victor's organization had been purchasing American secrets through Daniel's technology contracts. But the most powerful moment came when she was asked about choosing cooperation over safety. "Why didn't you accept witness protection?" the prosecutor asked. "Because running away doesn't stop the problem. It just moves it to the next victim." Aaliyah looked directly at Victor as she continued. "This man's organization has destroyed hundreds of lives across multiple countries. Women like me, families torn apart by violence, communities devastated by arms dealing and drug trafficking. And you believe testifying would make a difference? I believe that someone had to draw a line and say no more. If not me, then who? If not now, then when?" Victor's expression remained cold, but something flickered in his eyes that looked like recognition. This wasn't the broken woman he'd tried to intimidate 6 months ago. The defense attorney tried to paint Aaliyah as a vengeful widow seeking to blame others for her husband's crimes. But her testimony remained steady, focused not on revenge, but on prevention. "Mrs. Morrison, isn't it true that you're testifying because you want these men to suffer the way you've suffered?" "No," Aaliyah replied calmly. "I'm testifying because I want their future victims to never suffer at all." During recess, Sarah found her in the courthouse bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. "You're doing great in there." Victor's lawyer is scrambling to discredit testimony that's been corroborated by evidence from 3 intelligence agencies. "What's the latest on sentencing recommendations?" "Life without parole for Victor. His organization's been dismantled across 12 countries. The arms dealing network is finished." Aaliyah dried her hands while studying her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked tired but determined, carrying new life while fighting to destroy the legacy of death her husband had left behind. "Any word from the other families?" The Morrison Foundation received its federal approval yesterday. Jennifer Walsh wants to head the Houston office. Maria Santos' sister is organizing victim support networks in Texas. Rebecca Kim is developing technology to help law enforcement track financial crimes. The foundation they built from the ashes of Daniel's criminal empire was becoming something powerful, a network of survivors who refused to let their trauma define other people's futures. "What about my family? Your mother's doing well in protective housing. Your sister's excited about becoming an aunt. And your brother says he's proud of you for fighting instead of running." The baby moved as if responding to news about its extended family. Aaliyah placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the life that would grow up, knowing its mother had chosen justice over safety. When court resumed, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Viktor Kozlov was convicted on all counts: racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit treason, and dozens of related charges. As the judge read the sentence, life in federal prison without possibility of parole, Victor looked directly at Aaliyah for the first time since her testimony began. His expression held no remorse, but it carried something else, understanding that he'd underestimated the wrong woman. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as Aaliyah walked to the waiting federal vehicle. But she stopped at the microphones for one final statement. 6 months ago, I learned that my husband had been selling American secrets to international criminals. Today, those criminals face justice. But this isn't about revenge, it's about prevention. She paused, one hand on her pregnant belly, looking directly into the cameras. The Morrison Foundation will work to identify and support victims of international crime networks. We'll provide resources for law enforcement agencies tracking financial crimes. And we'll make sure that no woman has to face these monsters alone. What would you say to other victims who are afraid to come forward? That survival isn't about staying quiet. It's about refusing to let evil win by default. Someone has to draw the line. Someone has to say no more. As her security detail escorted her to the car, Aaliyah felt something she hadn't experienced since before she'd overheard Daniel's cruel bet 18 months ago. Peace. Not because her enemies were destroyed, but because she'd chosen to build something stronger than revenge. The baby kicked again, and Aaliyah smiled. Some legacies were worth rewriting. 9 months after discovering her husband's cruelest bet, Aaliyah was about to win something he could never take away: the chance to create a love that was real. Atlanta's Emory Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos of life beginning. Outside the windows, Georgia peach trees bloomed despite the February cold, their pink blossoms defying winter with the same stubbornness Aaliyah had shown in defying the men who tried to destroy her. How do you rebuild after betrayal? What does real love look like after you've experienced fake love? Share your journey of healing and growth, because what happened next proved that sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful. Dr. Kim monitored the contractions with professional calm, while Aaliyah breathed through pain that felt like redemption. Each wave brought her closer to meeting the person who would redefine everything she thought she knew about love. "You're doing great," Sarah said, holding her hand through another contraction. "Almost there." The woman who'd once been an undercover FBI agent had become Aaliyah's closest friend, her chosen sister in a family built by survival rather than blood. Sarah had taken leave from the Bureau to help establish the Morrison Foundation, using her investigative skills to track down victims who needed support. "Any word from the others?" Aaliyah asked between contractions. Jennifer's Houston office identified 12 new victims just this week. Rebecca's technology platform helped prosecutors in Phoenix arrest a fraud ring. Maria's sister opened the second counseling center in El Paso. The Morrison Foundation had grown beyond anything Aaliyah had imagined. What started as one woman's quest for justice had become a nationwide network helping survivors of financial crimes, fake marriages, and international fraud schemes. And my mother? Driving everyone crazy with baby preparations. She's convinced this child is going to change the world. Aaliyah laughed, then winced as another contraction hit. She might be right. Dr. Kim looked up from the monitors. "This is it. Time to meet your daughter." The next few minutes blurred together in intensity and wonder. Pain that felt like breaking open, effort that required everything she had, and then suddenly, a cry that filled the room with new possibility. "She's perfect," Dr. Kim announced, placing the tiny, squirming life on Aaliyah's chest. Looking down at her daughter's face, red and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful, Aaliyah felt something shift in her chest. All the anger she'd carried, all the plans for revenge, all the need to prove something to the world melted away in the face of unconditional love. "Hello, baby girl," she whispered, touching the tiny fingers that gripped hers with surprising strength. "Welcome to the world." Sarah wiped away tears she probably didn't realize she was shedding. "What's her name?" Aaliyah had considered dozens of options, but looking at her daughter now, only one felt right. "Hope. Hope Morrison." Perfect. The next few hours passed in a haze of feeding attempts, visits from nurses, and the surreal reality of being responsible for someone so completely dependent yet so perfectly formed. Sarah handled the logistics, fielding calls from foundation staff, managing security arrangements, and keeping reporters at bay. The trial had made Aaliyah a public figure, but she was determined to give Hope as normal a childhood as possible. "There's someone here to see you," Sarah said during one of Hope's naps. "Says he's been trying to reach you for weeks." Marcus Chun, no relation to Sarah, entered the hospital room with the nervous energy of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation many times. He was the federal prosecutor who'd handled Victor's case, but this visit was clearly personal. "Mrs. Morrison, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I brought something I thought you should have." He handed her a letter that had been sealed in an evidence bag. "This was found in your husband's cell after his death. It was addressed to you, but federal regulations required us to hold it until the trial concluded." Aaliyah stared at the envelope with her name written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. "What does it say?" "I haven't read it." "That's your choice to make." Sarah moved closer, ready to provide support for whatever emotional landmine Daniel had left behind. But Aaliyah felt strangely calm as she opened the letter. Aaliyah, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you're probably glad about it. I don't blame you. I know what I did, what I became, what I cost us both. I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness. What I did to you, to all the women before you, to the people who trusted me, there's no forgiveness for that. But I need you to know that the man you met in New Orleans was real. For those first few months, before the money and power corrupted everything, I loved you with the only honest part of myself I had left. I know that doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't make up for the bet, for the lies, for putting you in danger. But it's the only truth I have left to give you. Build something better from the wreckage I created. You're stronger than I ever deserved, and you'll be a better parent than I could have been. Take care of her child. Give them the love I forgot how to feel. Daniel. Aaliyah read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer of her hospital bedside table. What will you do with it? Sarah asked. Keep it. Hope might want to read it someday, when she's old enough to understand complicated truths. Are you okay? Aaliyah looked down at her sleeping daughter, then at the woman who'd become her chosen family, then out the window at peach blossoms blooming against all odds. Yeah, she said, and meant it completely. I really am. The past would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her future. For the first time in over a year, Aaliyah Morrison was exactly where she belonged. 3 years after a man bet on his wife's tears, she was finally crying. Not from pain, but from joy. Because the best revenge against someone who bet against your happiness is to build a life so beautiful it makes their cruelty irrelevant. The Morrison Foundation's Atlanta headquarters bustled with purpose on a Tuesday morning that felt like celebration. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline reminded everyone inside that they were part of something bigger than their individual stories of survival. What does it mean to truly win? Is it destroying your enemy or building something so beautiful their hatred becomes irrelevant? Share what victory looks like in your life, because this final chapter proves that some wars are won not by defeating enemies, but by refusing to become them. 3-year-old Hope Morrison toddled between desks with the confidence of someone who'd been raised by a village of strong women. Her dark curls bounced as she helped Jennifer Walsh organize victim files, her chatter filling the office with laughter that seemed to chase away shadows from everyone's past. Mama, look, Hope announced, holding up a crayon drawing that might have been a house or a dinosaur or abstract art. I made this for the sad ladies. It's beautiful, baby, Aaliyah said, kneeling to examine the masterpiece. What should we do with it? Put it on the wall so they know someone loves them. The simple wisdom of a 3-year-old cut straight to the heart of everything they'd built. The Morrison Foundation had grown from one woman's quest for justice into an international network providing support, resources, and hope to victims of financial crimes and intimate betrayal. Sarah appeared in the doorway, no longer the federal agent who'd orchestrated Daniel's downfall, but the Foundation's operations director and Hope's chosen aunt. The Justice Department just called. The legislation passed. The Morrison Act, federal law requiring financial institutions to report patterns indicating potential marriage fraud, would protect thousands of future victims from schemes like Daniel's. It was the culmination of 3 years of lobbying, testimony, and political maneuvering. How does it feel to change federal law? Jennifer asked, looking up from case files. Like a good start, Aaliyah replied, lifting Hope in her arms. But there's still work to do. The Foundation now operated offices in 12 cities, had identified and supported over 300 victims, and had assisted federal prosecutors in cases that dismantled criminal networks across 4 continents. But for Aaliyah, the real victory wasn't in the numbers. It was in the phone calls from women who'd found strength to leave abusive situations, the emails from families reunited after financial fraud, the photos of children who'd grow up safer because someone had chosen to fight rather than hide. Speaking of work, Sarah said with a knowing smile, you have a visitor. Dr. James Harrison entered the office, carrying coffee and wearing the slightly nervous expression of a man who still couldn't quite believe his luck. As the Foundation's chief medical advisor, he'd worked with Aaliyah for 8 months, their professional relationship gradually becoming something deeper. "How did the congressional hearing go?" he asked, settling beside her on the couch, while Hope claimed his lap with the casual ownership of a child who'd never doubted she was loved. "Senator Williams wants to expand the legislation to include international fraud tracking. Representative Johnson thinks we should add housing protection for victims. And you think? I think we keep building until no woman has to discover her entire marriage was a lie." James nodded, understanding flowing between them like a current that didn't require words. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, built on transparency and respect rather than passion and manipulation. He knew every detail of her past, every scar Daniel had left, every reason she might struggle to trust again. But he also knew the woman she'd become, fierce in protecting others, gentle in loving her daughter, determined to build something lasting from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. "Hope and I have something to show you," he said, pulling out his phone to display a photo of a house with a wraparound porch and a yard big enough for swing sets. "What's this?" "A place where foundation directors could live if they wanted privacy, security, and room for a 3-year-old to run around without armed guards." Aaliyah studied the photo, recognizing the careful way he was presenting this option, not as a demand or expectation, but as a possibility worth considering. "It's beautiful," she said honestly, but you've spent 3 years building something here, and moving feels like giving up?" Something like that. Hope looked up from the phone with the serious expression she wore when making important announcements. "Mama, Uncle James loves us." "I know, baby. And we love Uncle James." "We do. So why doesn't he live with us like other daddies do?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to fears that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the scars left by someone who taught her that love and manipulation could look identical. James didn't push, didn't argue, didn't make promises about forever. Instead, he simply said, "I'm not going anywhere, whether I live here or there or on the moon. You two are stuck with me." Hope giggled. "Uncle James is silly. Nobody lives on a moon." "You never know," he replied solemnly. "There might be a Morrison Foundation office there someday." That evening, after Hope was asleep and the foundation office was quiet, Aaliyah stood in her apartment, looking at the photo of the house with the wraparound porch. Sarah found her there, wine glasses in hand, thinking about domestic happiness, thinking about whether I remember how to be happy domestically. "You know the difference between Daniel and James, right? Tell me, Daniel wanted to own you. James wants to know you. There's a universe of difference between possession and partnership." Aaliyah thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a woman willing to trade her body to save her mother's life, to someone who'd helped change federal law to protect other women from predators. The bet Daniel had made was that she'd cry when he destroyed her world. But sitting in her own foundation office, surrounded by the family she'd chosen and the work that gave her life meaning, Aaliyah realized she'd won something far more valuable than his cruel wager. She'd won the right to write her own story. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "No pressure about the house. Just want you to know the offer stands forever. Love you both." For the first time in 4 years, Aaliyah Morrison typed back 3 words without fear. "Love you too." Hope stirred in her crib, and Aaliyah went to check on her daughter. The child who would grow up knowing that her mother had faced monsters and chosen to become a protector instead of a victim. The bet was over. The war was won. And the future belonged to women who refused to let cruel men define the boundaries of their dreams. If someone bet against your happiness today, what would you build to prove them wrong? Hit that like button if this story reminded you of your own strength. Subscribe for more stories about people who turned their pain into power. And remember, the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. It's becoming so happy that their cruelty becomes irrelevant. What will you build with your second chance?